The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution stand as foundational transformations that reshaped the legal and political order of the Republic. Enacted in the wake of the Civil War, these measures abolished slavery, established birthright citizenship with equal protection guarantees, and prohibited racial discrimination in voting for adult males. They emerged from the unique conditions of Northern military victory and the temporary exclusion of Southern representatives from Congress. White Protestant Republican legislators drove the process through open congressional channels, utilizing the power to judge member qualifications and guarantee Republican government. The amendments passed because the postwar power imbalance allowed Republican majorities to meet the stringent requirements of Article 5. Once ratified, they became nearly impossible to reverse, embedding broad, universalist principles into the constitutional framework. These amendments created enduring legal instruments that later generations expanded in unforeseen directions. The 14th Amendment, in particular, supplied the textual foundation for expansive interpretations of citizenship, due process, and equal protection. This opened pathways for subsequent civil rights legislation, anti-discrimination statutes, and policies addressing group equality. The sequence illustrates how constitutional changes enacted in one era can function as force multipliers for developments in later periods. Theoretical reverse engineering of this pathway reveals how early decisions regarding emancipation and equality enabled broader legal and policy shifts concerning immigration, pluralism, and international alignments. The amendments removed formal barriers and normalized federal intervention in matters of rights and group status, setting structural conditions for 20th century activism and reform efforts. The long-term trajectory connects these 19th century amendments to patterns of influence and policy evolution. Small, cohesive groups with strong cultural continuity and strategic adaptability could theoretically identify and leverage such constitutional openings over generations. The Reconstruction era provided a rare moment of fluidity in which universalist language was entrenched. This language later supported movements that advanced equality claims, demographic openness, and foreign policy priorities. The theoretical construct posits these amendments as a critical node in a longer chain of events that facilitated expanded influence in legislation, administration, and judicial interpretation. The framework highlights the compounding effects of foundational constitutional choices on subsequent historical developments. The Civil War context and amendment origins. The Civil War created the conditions that made radical constitutional revision possible. Sectional divisions over slavery's expansion, economic systems, and political power escalated into armed conflict after Southern secession and the attack on Fort Sumter. The Union's victory restored geographic unity, but left the question of freed people's status unresolved. Congressional majorities, empowered by the exclusion of Southern delegations, seized the opportunity to embed permanent changes. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery nationwide. The 14th established birthright citizenship and equal protection, and the 15th protected voting rights regardless of race. These measures exceeded the minimum requirements for ending the rebellion and reunifying the country. Legislators operated within Protestant reform traditions that viewed slavery as a national sin. They combined moral conviction with partisan calculations aimed at securing a loyal Southern voting base. The amendments were broad and unconditional, lacking apprenticeship periods, economic safeguards, or assimilation mechanisms. This design reflected the urgency of locking in gains before political conditions shifted. Theoretical analysis suggests that such sweeping provisions created high-leverage tools for future expansion. The 14th Amendment's vague yet powerful language proved particularly adaptable to later judicial and legislative purposes. The process relied on military oversight during ratification, especially for the 14th Amendment, ensuring compliance from restructured Southern governments. The sequence demonstrates path dependency in constitutional development. Once embedded, the amendments shaped the legal environment in which subsequent actors operated. Small groups with strategic orientation could theoretically align with or build upon these foundations to advance related interests. The Reconstruction period thus functions as a pivotal juncture where immediate postwar power translated into enduring structural changes. These changes facilitated later movements that extended equality principles into new domains, including civil rights advocacy and policy reforms. The theoretical construct emphasizes how early constitutional engineering can generate long-term trajectories beyond the original actor's explicit intentions. Jewish participation and theoretical alignment patterns. Jewish communities existed on both sides of the Civil War, reflecting divided regional loyalties rather than unified direction. In the Confederacy, Judah P. Benjamin held senior positions including Secretary of State, demonstrating individual integration into Southern leadership. Northern Jews contributed to the Union effort through military service, financing, and chaplaincy roles. Congressional participation remained marginal, with 2 Jewish representatives exercising limited influence. This distribution illustrates how small minorities navigated national divisions without centralized coordination. In theoretical reverse engineering terms, the amendments created conditions that later enabled expanded activism. The legal tools of citizenship and equal protection provided frameworks that 20th century civil rights efforts could invoke. Jewish organizations and individuals became prominent in these movements, leveraging the 14th Amendment's legacy to advance equality claims. This participation extended to immigration reform and anti-discrimination measures. The pattern suggests how foundational universalist provisions could align with group interests favoring openness and minority protections. Over time, accumulated influence in legal, activist, and policy domains compounded these advantages. The theoretical model posits that strategic adaptability allows small groups to identify and utilize structural opportunities across generations. The Reconstruction Amendments removed formal racial hierarchies and established federal precedents for rights enforcement. These changes theoretically facilitated environments more conducive to pluralistic advocacy and demographic flexibility. Subsequent developments in civil rights, immigration legislation, and related policies built upon this base. The construct highlights potential alignment between early constitutional shifts and later patterns of influence without requiring direct 19th century orchestration. Pathways to Israel and broader influence. The theoretical chain extends to the establishment and expansion of Israel. The Reconstruction Amendments contributed to a domestic legal culture emphasizing equality and federal power. This environment supported mid-20th century activism that strengthened Jewish organizational capacity and political influence. Post-Holocaust sympathy and Cold War dynamics converged with these domestic shifts to enable strong U.S. backing for Israel's creation in 1948. Consistent American support, diplomatic, financial, and military, facilitated the state's survival and territorial consolidation. In this framework, the amendments served as an early enabling node in a longer sequence. Universalist constitutional language normalized advocacy for group rights and international causes. Accumulated influence in U.S. policy circles translated into sustained support for a Jewish homeland. The pattern reflects how domestic legal transformations can reverberate into foreign policy alignments. Theoretical forward planning suggests that securing equality frameworks in a rising global power could create favorable conditions for national self-determination efforts elsewhere. The expansion of Israel alongside continued U.S. engagement illustrates the compounding effects of earlier constitutional decisions. The model emphasizes path dependency rather than inevitability. Constitutional provisions written in the 1860s created tools that later actors adapted to new circumstances. Jewish communities demonstrated continuity and strategic focus across generations, leveraging opportunities within evolving American institutions. This theoretical construct connects Reconstruction-era changes to 20th century outcomes in civil rights, immigration, and Middle East policy. It underscores the long reach of foundational amendments on both domestic and international developments. In conclusion, the Reconstruction Amendments reshaped the American constitutional order through provisions that abolished slavery, defined citizenship, and protected voting rights. These changes created enduring legal instruments that subsequent movements expanded in multiple directions. Theoretical reverse engineering reveals pathways from 19th century postwar decisions to 20th century civil rights advancements, immigration reforms, and sustained U.S. support for Israel. The amendments functioned as high-leverage interventions that removed barriers and normalized equality-based claims. Their broad language enabled judicial and legislative developments with far-reaching consequences. Jewish participation reflected individual and communal adaptation within American society. Patterns of influence emerged in activism, law, and policy domains built upon the constitutional foundations established during Reconstruction. The theoretical model illustrates how early structural changes can generate long-term alignments favorable to group continuity and advancement. The sequence from Civil War victory to constitutional overhaul to later policy outcomes highlights the enduring impact of decisions made in moments of concentrated power. These amendments remain among the most consequential alterations in U.S. constitutional history. Their legacy encompasses both the end of legal slavery and the creation of frameworks that shaped modern debates over rights, identity, and national purpose. The theoretical construct underscores the profound and compounding effects of 19th century choices on subsequent historical trajectories, including domestic pluralism and international relationships. The Reconstruction Amendments, thus, stand as pivotal elements in the evolution of American and global dynamics.